The Soviet Union, 1922 to 1991. The rise and fall of a superpower, revolution and foundation, 1917 to 1922. The Soviet Union's story began with the Russian Revolution of 1917. Amid World War I, the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, overthrew the Russian monarchy, ending centuries of imperial rule. The civil war that followed pitted the Red Army, Bolsheviks, against the White Army, anti-communists, culminating in a Bolshevik victory. In 1922, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, was formally established, uniting Russia and neighboring republics under communist rule. Lenin's era and early reforms, 1922 to 1924. Though Lenin died in 1924, his short tenure saw the implementation of the new economic policy, NEP, which allowed limited capitalism to rebuild the war-torn economy. Lenin's death triggered a power struggle, eventually won by Joseph Stalin. Stalin's rule, industrialization and terror, 1924 to 1953, Stalin centralized power and launched aggressive five-year plans to industrialize the nation. While the USSR became a major industrial power, the cost was staggering. Millions died in famines, notably the Holodomor in Ukraine, and in purges during the Great Terror. Stalin's rule was marked by brutal repression, forced labor camps, gulags, and the elimination of political enemies. World War II and the rise of a superpower, 1939 to 1945, initially signing a non-aggression pact with Nazi Germany, the USSR was later invaded in 1941. The Soviet Union played a decisive role in defeating Hitler, enduring massive casualties but ultimately capturing Berlin in 1945. Victory elevated the USSR to superpower status. The Cold War begins, 1945 to 1953, post-World War II, Stalin expanded Soviet influence in Eastern Europe, creating satellite states and launching the Cold War against the capitalist West, particularly the United States. The Iron Curtain, the Berlin Blockade, and the nuclear arms race defined this era. Khrushchev and the Thaw, 1953 to 1964, after Stalin's death, Nikita Khrushchev denounced his predecessor's crimes in a secret speech and initiated a period known as the Khrushchev Thaw. It saw limited liberalization, space exploration milestones like Sputnik, 1957, and Yuri Gagarin's flight, 1961, and Cold War confrontations such as the Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962. The era of stagnation, 1964 to 1982, Leonid Brezhnev's tenure marked a return to conservative policies and economic stagnation. The Soviet Union maintained global influence, but inefficiency, corruption, and a rigid bureaucracy plagued the system. Despite military might and nuclear parity with the U.S., internal weaknesses grew. Afghanistan and the decline, 1979 to 1985, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 became the USSR's Vietnam, a costly, unwinnable war that drained resources and morale. It further strained relations with the West and sparked resistance from US-backed Mujahideen fighters. Gorbachev's reforms, Perestroika and Glasnost, 1985 to 1991, Mikhail Gorbachev introduced Perestroika, economic restructuring, and Glasnost, openness, to revitalize the Soviet system. However, these reforms unintentionally unleashed nationalist movements and calls for independence across the USSR, alongside economic instability, collapse and disintegration. 1991. By 1991, the Soviet economy was faltering, the political system was fractured, and republics were demanding independence. A failed coup by hardliners in August 1991 weakened central authority. On December 25, 1991, Gorbachev resigned, and the Soviet Union officially dissolved. 15 independent republics emerged, and the Cold War ended. Legacy of the Soviet Union, the USSR was a complex power, responsible for tremendous achievements in science and education, yet marked by authoritarianism and repression. It reshaped the 20th century and left a lasting impact on geopolitics, technology, and ideology.